What is up everyone, it is me DevilNeverCry, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you my top combat tips for beginners in Ninja Gaiden 4. As always, this guide will be spoiler free and aims to give you a primer for those of you who are new to the series or perhaps haven't played a Ninja Gaiden title in quite a long time. If you want to see more of these guides, please let me know down in the comments below, and with that said, let's dive in. Starting with the very basics, mobility. This is definitely not a game where you are expected to stand and hold your ground. You should be dodging quite frequently, moving around the battlefield, and making sure to take advantage of places of higher elevation, whether that's through wall runs or pulling yourself up to vantage points with the caddis wire. Blocking leaves you completely immobile and at a disadvantage, and soon enough they're going to start throwing multiple enemies at you, all attacking at the same time, which can quite easily break through your guard. So condition yourself early and keep moving. That includes making good use of the dodge as you can see here, and its generous iframes, which will get you through a lot of attacks. This next tip is all about Yakumo and his moves. Very early on in the game, you're going to come across a shrine in which you're able to purchase a series of moves for Yakumo. If you've played previous Ninja Gaidens, you'll see a lot of very familiar moves here that should be considered standard bread and butter tactics. The game also makes some of the most useful moves the cheapest, allowing you to get them early on. The first of which of course is going to be the Flying Swallow. This is fantastic for closing down the distance, and it gets you airborne and usually away from a lot of other enemies' attacks. It also has the added benefit of sometimes completely decapitating enemies for you, instantly killing them. Though I wouldn't rely on that feature of it all too much. The second move you should definitely be picking up is the Izuna Drop combo. Perhaps the most iconic move or combo from Ninja Gaiden. This effectively launches your enemy up, hits them with an aerial combo, and then sends them crashing back down to the ground. This is an important move not only because it gets you into an ending animation which typically is quite safe, but for a majority of this you'll be up in the air, away from enemies on the ground. The next two skills I recommend that you purchase have to do with ultimate techniques, which I want to quickly explain their functionality for a second so you understand why I suggest buying these moves. Ultimate techniques, as the name implies, are these powerful moves which Yakumo is able to charge up over a period of time before he goes into a canned animation full of invincibility frames, leaving him completely invulnerable from anything coming his way. To use one of these techniques, you have to press and hold the triangle button, at least on PlayStation, which leaves Yakumo completely defenseless, particularly if you want to charge to a higher level, which takes even further time. You can instantly gain the charge for an ultimate technique by absorbing a blood essence that is somewhere on the battlefield. You just have to charge up the technique, and provided the blood essence is on the battlefield, it'll automatically be absorbed or vacuumed towards Yakumo, buffing up his attack to whatever charge level you have at the maximum. Given the amount of relentless ferocity from enemies, particularly as you get further on in the game, this becomes less and less plausible, which is where the landing ultimate technique move that you can buy comes into play. Upon landing from a jump or a jumping attack, or just being airborne, if you press and hold the ultimate technique button, Yakumo will instantly start to charge up an ultimate technique, cutting down the charge time somewhat considerably. Pair this with a blood essence that's around on the battlefield, and you can almost instantly have a ultimate technique ready to go as you land. So as previously mentioned, where mobility is the aim of the game and you're constantly going to be moving around and jumping and dodging, this move is almost invaluable. As an added tip here, if you want to avoid absorbing a blood essence because you want to save it for an ultimate technique, for example, then what you can do is you can press and hold the block button as you're moving around and attacking, and it just means that no matter what, you won't accidentally absorb a blood essence, allowing you to save it for when you want to charge an ultimate technique. So by making use of these tips, effectively what you can do is chain a set of on-landing ultimate techniques to quickly clear out a room. If you're tackling some of the purgatory challenges, then these are invaluable. The other move I suggest that you buy pertaining to ultimate techniques has to be the final charge. This effectively allows you to add a second stage to your ultimate technique, furthering the amount of damage that you do increasing the amount of iframes. It also has a longer animation, and if you're able to play your cards right, you can actually hit multiple enemies with your ultimate technique. Just ensure that they're grouped up and you'll be fine. Ninja Gaiden 4 and the rest of the Ninja Gaiden games are not like DevilNeverCry. Let me explain what I mean by that. Typically in the DMC games, enemies will only start their attack animations when they're somewhere on screen. When they're not on screen, they'll be extremely passive and they'll do their best to get on screen so they can start an attack animation. That is not the case here. Enemies will start attack animations off screen, and it is up to you to ensure that you are not completely blindsided by an attack. This means that you should pay attention to the little markers that appear almost like the edge of a reticle to notify you of where enemies are and when an attack is headed your way. If you see anything like an exclamation point or enemies start to glow, it will usually mean that they're coming at you with an attack that cannot be blocked and it has to be evaded. Or if you want to stagger them out of it, you can go into your Bloodraven form and hit them with a simple attack. This will keep you safe and avoid a hard-hitting attack coming your way. This whole notion, by the way, of awareness or combat situational awareness leads me on to my next point, and that is that you really should be dividing and conquering. What I mean by that is that the game is going to throw a lot of combat encounters at you that focuses on enemies that have both close range attacks and long range attacks. You'll have ones that are almost exclusively long range, and those are the ones that I suggest you take out first. These are the ones with attacks that are going to hit you from incredibly far away, they're going to knock you out of midair, they're going to blindside you completely, and they're going to be a pain whilst you try and focus on the other enemies who are nearby. So make a beeline for them and just make sure that you take them out first, and your life will typically be a whole lot easier. Thank you to those of you, by the way, who are still listening at this point. Moving on to my next tip, obliteration techniques. Now, I mentioned ultimate techniques just a little while ago, and you might be confused about the differences between the two, and there is a vast difference between the two. There is a delimbing system in Ninja Gaiden where once you do enough damage to an enemy and you hit him with an attack, you'll remove a limb. Some attacks actually are more predisposed, I believe, to taking limbs off of enemies. What this means is you'll have an enemy that is somewhere on the battlefield who is in a weakened state but is still quite dangerous. By simply going up to them and pressing the triangle button, or the heavy attack button I suppose, you'll hit them with an insta-kill, which I believe is full of iframes, allowing you to remove them from play entirely. So if you hear an enemy scream about being delimbed, or you see one shuffling around the battlefield, make your way over to them and be sure to use an obliteration technique to get them out of the way completely. Let's talk about Yakumo's Bloodraven form. This is a form that allows Yakumo's attacks and his weapons to be modified and take on a different appearance and a different moveset. Everything to do with the Bloodraven form is tied to the Bloodbind gauge, which fills automatically and I believe also fills every time you perform an attack successfully. So you really shouldn't be afraid of using this form. The only thing I would keep in mind is that charging Yakumo's attacks in this form takes a considerable amount of time. So I would suggest that if you're gonna be doing that, you pay attention to spacing and make sure that enemies can't close the distance by the time your attacks come out. One of the last few systems that I want to touch upon is the parrying and the perfect blocking and dodging. As I previously mentioned, the game does not revolve entirely around these systems, but it's good to have them in your repertoire, particularly when facing off against a lone enemy or a boss, for example. Parrying can be done by timing one of your attacks just before an enemy attack hits you. A parry will typically cause both you and the enemy's attacks to bounce off of each other. I would suggest that if you want to follow up with a retort, then you pick up the Fatal Flash skill, which does a decent amount of damage. What people might consider more useful perhaps is the perfect block. When you block an enemy's attack right at the last second, what will happen is they'll just bounce off of your defense, leaving them open for a split second, which for me is why I find this much more useful than just the standard parry. And similar to parrying, you can purchase a move called Reflect, which allows you to retort with your own counterattack after a perfect block. It should be noted, however, that there's also abilities which allow you to automatically counterattack after a perfect block or a parry simply by being in the Bloodraven form. If parrying or blocking aren't your forte, enacting a perfect dodge will slow down time for a split second, allowing you to get an attack in. If you want, you can also purchase the Mirage skill, which allows you to hit triangle, just like parrying and blocking, to come back with your own attack. So the inputs here are very much standardized. It all depends on what your preference is. I will say again, there are moves which cannot be blocked, so do not rely purely on blocking to save you. Parrying definitely comes with an increased amount of risk, and ultimately the safest option of all three has to be dodging. So make of that what you will, and choose what you want depending on how brave you want to be. And last but certainly not least, please make use of the training room and make sure you use it to good effect. Whether it's the training room that you use whenever you're buying a new skill and you're prompted to test it out, or you can hop into the training mode at any point in the game by just pausing the game, going into the system menu and selecting training. There is nothing more important than just taking the time to get accustomed to all of the tools in your skill set, and the only way you're going to get better at the game is by playing. It has a move list, it has an enemy spawner, you can spawn in blood essence, you can mess around with whether or not you want enemies delimbed, you can change enemy aggression, etc. There's plenty of settings for you to get stuck in there with, so there really is no excuse. And with that, we round out my top combat tips for beginners in Ninja Gaiden 4. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, leave a like and consider subscribing for more Ninja Gaiden 4 content. And also, let me know down in the comments below if you feel that there's something that should be included that I have missed. I'm curious to see what everyone else comes up with. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.